Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Ian Kavat. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has headed to Washington to make his case for more military aid. The latest package with 50 to 60 billion US dollars in aid for Ukraine is locked in the US Congress after Republicans in the Senate blocked its passage. We ask what the implications are and what it means for Taiwan. With me to discuss this are Wennie Wu, National Chengchi University Department of Political Science professor, and Wennie Wu, Kuomintang legislative candidate and Chiayi County Women's Association chairperson. Both a very warm welcome to the show today. American military funding for Ukraine has fallen to record lows as US attention is diverted to Israel and war fatigue sets in. Republicans, including House of Representatives Speaker Mike Johnson, blocked the latest military package to demand greater domestic US border security, especially with Mexico. Professor Su, let me come to you first. So without the funding, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says Ukraine will lose the war. And President Biden has said that this is the greatest gift that they could give to Putin. So what does it say about the continuity of support for Ukraine in the US?
I think the current development in the US Congress policy-making process indicates that indeed the US support for Ukraine is jeopardized, well, at least for now. So without this supportive materials, it is likely that the progress in the war will be influenced. But this kind of development also indicates that domestic politics indeed have a tremendous impact on foreign policy making, and it is not surprising in democracies like the US. But unless the Biden administration would like to withdraw its support from Ukraine, the administration really needs to find an alternative way to support Ukraine, or it really needs to make some negotiation with the Republicans.
Wennie, do you think time is running out? The Congress will break for recess on December 15th.
I do think that time is running out, but I do think that both Congress and President Biden, they know that this is a very important thing that they have to pass. So I think that eventually they won't stop foreign aid to Ukraine entirely.
Okay, Professor Su, now Biden went on to say that if aid was stopped, this would abandon our global leadership, not just in Ukraine, but beyond that. How would this play a reduction, a significant reduction, or as Wennie was saying that she doesn't believe that it would be a complete stop to funding, but if it was a significant drop, how would this play into China's hands?
Well, for China, I think China is not only learning from the battlefield in Ukraine, but also learning from how the U.S. Domestic politics influence this the policy making of the foreign policy. So if Ukraine wins the war, I think at least it will provide some implications for the Taiwanese people. But I'm not sure whether it will send any kind of meaningful message to China.
The professor was saying was that maybe that he doesn't think that China would be able to extrapolate too much from the situation in Ukraine. Do you agree with that?
So I think there are two arguments here, and the one is that if Russia is victorious over this Ukraine-Russia war, that Beijing may be more emboldened to take action in the Taiwan Strait. And that is what some analysts are saying. But I think it is very important to think of the other side of the argument, which is that the United States is stretched thin right now with what is happening in Ukraine and Israel. And so the US industrial base is not adequately prepared for what is happening now in the international security environment. I mean, we in Taipei, we commend and we support Ukraine for its brave resistance for what it's doing, but we also have to prioritize our own country's interests. So, for example, there has been a lot of significant delays in weapon systems being delivered from the United States
to Taiwan.
To Taiwan, yes. So in 2020, we ordered 400 Harpoon anti-missile weapon systems, and some reports suggest that these can only be delivered by 2029. One side, if Russia is victorious, it may embolden Beijing, but the other side is if Ukraine continues, then the U.S. will continue to stretch thin its foreign aid that it can provide to other countries.
So it seems that either way, this would benefit China. And going back to the sort of Republican versus the Democrat, argument, let's put it that way, in Congress, that wouldn't be the situation with Taiwan, though, Wennie. The support for Taiwan is bipartisan.
Yes, the support for Taiwan is bipartisan, and we are lucky in that way, but we still have to be prepared. It doesn't mean that we can rely entirely on another country for our own future.
So that means building up Taiwan's indigenous and own sort of industry there in terms of building its own homemade weapons is very important. Something that the president has emphasised. Professor Su, so former UK Prime Minister David Cameron, he's now the current Foreign Secretary of the UK. He was in Washington to urge the US to, unblock this aid package. Now, in a speech he gave, he said that Britain and the US remain committed to the One China policy. But then he went on to say, London and Washington believe in unification of China and Taiwan, but that cannot happen in a way that involves force or violence or coercion. So is this statement correct about the US's position?
Well, I think here, he was a little bit outspoken, I think, in that way, in a way, because I think what he really wanted to emphasize would be the peaceful resolution of this the situation between China and Taiwan instead of unification. Because when we look back to One China policy, it is based on the so-called 3 communiques and the TRA and also 6 assurances, and there's nothing mentioned about unification.
Wennie, do you agree that the former Prime Minister rather overstepped the mark there?
Yes, I do agree, because as Professor mentioned, it doesn't say that it wants unification in any of the United States One China, whether it is the 3 communiques or the TRA or the 6 assurances. And it is important to note that in the 6 assurances, it does also say that there's no mediation role for the United States for negotiate between Taiwan and the PRC, and nor will they exert pressure for us to go into negotiations. So I think the 2 most important things here are, 1, it has to be by peaceful means, no coercion, and secondly, it has to have the assent of the Taiwanese people.
Now, recently, an article in Foreign Affairs magazine entitled "Taiwan and the True Sources of Deterrence: Why America Must Reassure, Not Just Threaten China," has caused a stir in Taiwan and among the overseas community. My next guest, Chieh-Ting Yeh, a venture investor in Silicon Valley and a director of international think tank US Taiwan Watch, explains why.
So this article, I think, came at a time when there's an election going on in Taiwan right now, and 2, I think everybody is very kind of sensitive to what kind of messages is coming out from the American foreign policy think tank community as to how American scholars are thinking about Taiwan's election and thinking about the future of U.S.-Taiwan relations. So I think there's a little bit of a shock where people are saying things like, Taiwan should, basically do more to, in a sense, make China a little happier.
What they're saying is that perhaps the DPP candidate, Lai Ching-te, should renounce independence and reaffirm essentially that he wants to stick to the status quo. Is there anything wrong with doing that?
There's nothing wrong with asking that, only except that I think Vice President Lai Ching-te has repeatedly said during the campaign that he will do his best to maintain the status quo, and that his foreign policy and his China policy is essentially going a continuation of President Tsai Ing-wen's policies. I think there is a line of thinking that says, well, if we leave the path of peaceful annexation open to China, maybe the possibility of war will decrease. But I think the point is that China's calculus of whether to invade Taiwan or whether to force Taiwan into an annexation by show of force or by intimidation, that calculus is not completely based on what Taiwan and Washington do, right?
What do you think would be the effect if Taiwan was to provide the assurances that the authors suggest in the article?
So no matter how many assurances or no matter how much goodwill the U.S. and Taiwan shows China, the fundamental problem that China wants to change the status quo of Taiwan being a separate sovereign country than China, that's not going to change. China is they basically want to annex Taiwan, whether peacefully or militarily.
You said that the article strains to create a false equivalence between the parties, US, China, Taiwan. Can you explain that a bit more?
They said, President Tsai Ing-wen allow for the history curriculum in Taiwan to be more Taiwan-centric than China-centric, right? And from my perspective, it's very hard to say that this is as equally a serious offense as China, sending the fighter jets and naval ships around Taiwan and to intimidate Taiwan with its display of military might. Make a case to say that all three sides are equally at fault is just not, to me, is just not an accurate description of what's going on right now.
And you also mentioned that there are a few articles that have emerged in a similar vein. Why do you think that is?
At least certainly in the last 5 years, there's been a what I call the Great China Debate happening in Washington. So the first question for America was, should we continue to treat China as a friend and as a partner for engagement, hoping that they will become so-called responsible stakeholder, or should we now see China as more of a competitor and as more of a rival, right? And so I think that debate has more or less been settled, right? Now, the second question is, well, how do we do it, right? Just how much should we put on this, so-called this carrot or the stick? What is the right amount of, or what is the right mix of assurance and deterrence and threats, I think that part is a much harder discussion. I think the authors of the Foreign Affairs article and the other articles that I've cited in my piece, I do believe that they come from very good intentions. They want what's best for Taiwan, right? And they want to prevent war in the Taiwan Strait. And I think that's something that everybody can agree with. I think that those conversations will continue, and that's something that I of course would like to see more of.
That was Taiwan expert Chieh-Ting Yeh speaking with me earlier about the article penned by Bonnie Glaser, Jessica Chen Weiss, and Thomas Christensen. Professor Su, let me come to you first. So, as a Taiwanese, what is your view of this article, which we said triggered a lot of controversy?
Well, overall, it's a kind of freedom of speech, of course, and they can express their argument. But here when we analyze what they wrote in the article, we can observe that their argument is based on a very important assumption, which is that when all of these three parties make assurance, they will keep their word. And everyone is looking at that. But the thing is that for democracies, it is likely that the government, once they make assurances and for foreign policy, they will keep their words because they face the pressure from domestic politics.
Yeah, there's accountability in the democratic system.
Yeah. But in dictatorship, I mean, they don't have that kind of pressure. It's pretty difficult to hold accountable about their words. They argue in their article is mostly about wishful thinking, that they believe that once China make their assurance, they will keep their words. I doubt it.
Okay, Wennie, so China's assurances may not mean much. We heard that from Professor. What's your view?
So I think in this article to say that they place blame entirely on Taiwan I think those words are used a little bit harshly, because in my view, this article, it provides neutral advice to all three parties.
I think the point, Winnie, was not that it only put the blame on Taiwan and the US, but that there was an attempt for it to be equal, whereas the aggressor is China, according to the
well,
article.
they did mention in the they did mention in the article that Beijing is responsible for the breakdown of dialogue. So they did say that. So I think all in all, it was really just to give advice and suggestions, and I think we should take this advice actively, consider it, and make intelligent decisions to deter war.
Professor?
As I said before, the situation in Taiwan Strait is largely constrained by three things: objections from China about Taiwan's existence, and one China policy of the United States, and also Taiwanese people's will. Right. So, so in this article, they didn't mention too much about Taiwanese people's will. And I think it is not a, well, it is something that we should not ignore. Especially for me, I think right now, if peace is the primary goal, there are two ways to achieve this goal. One is peace via deterrence, and the other is peace via talk. And for the US, actually, I don't think that they have a strong preference for either way, right? And I think the point here is that it all depends on Taiwanese people's will. If Taiwanese people wants to retain the status quo or the status of de facto independence, in the past 23 years, I don't think that the U.S. have any preference for either way of pursuing peace, because as we can see in 2015 in the summit between Ma and Xi, the U.S. State Department welcomed their meeting, and during the past 7 years in which the Tsai administration pursued the peace via deterrence, we also received support from the U.S. So basically, peace is the most important thing that the U.S. want to secure.
I just want to quote some figures from the latest Chengchi University survey. So maintain the status quo and decide later. Sorry, the first one is maintain the status quo indefinitely, 32%. Maintain status quo and decide later, 28%. And maintain status quo and move towards independence, 21%. If you add all those up, it comes to 82%. So in the majority, as the Professor said, of the will of the Taiwanese people is to maintain that de facto independence, with some of them saying, decide later, or some of them moving towards independence. Wennie, let's take a look at a few quotes from the article. As the Nobel Prize-winning economist Thomas Schelling wrote years ago, one more step and I shoot can be a deterrent threat only if accompanied by the implicit assurance, and if you stop, I won't shoot. US military threats will lose their potency, this is what the authors say in the article, if Chinese leaders believe that the United States will take advantage of their restraint to promote Taiwan's formal independence or to prevent even peaceful unification. Wennie, so that quote, does that take into consideration what Xi Jinping and the CCP has made very clear, which is that taking Taiwan for China is about national rejuvenation? It's something that they intend to do.
So I think it is important here to go back to the One China policy and the Taiwan Relations Act, where it states very clearly that if any action taken by force is highly condemned, okay, it is of grave concern to the United States and is a threat to Western Pacific.
And but it's
here
not something
we have
that
the
Xi
support.
Jinping's renounced.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so what he has said, I cannot predict that when or if he will, but a lot of people didn't think that Putin would invade Ukraine back then. But however, regardless, we have to be prepared. We have to pursue self-defense, and so this is also something that Mayor Hou Yu-ih has said: deterrence, dialogue, and de-escalation. And these are the 3D strategy that he has introduced. And I think it is important for us to continue by that.
Professor Su, would you like to comment on this quote and anything that Wennie has said?
My point would be that, yes, I agree with Wennie that it is very important to strengthen our military capability if we still want to maintain our the status for de facto independence. And one thing that I want to mention is that some Taiwanese people believe that the U.S. will help us no matter what. And I don't think that is the case. I want to emphasize that the U.S. prioritized its goal of pursuing peace in the region. And actually the U.S. Foreign policy, we cannot ignore that the policy is still guided by the One China policy. So one inconvenient truth that many Taiwanese might think would be that actually the U.S. don't care too much about how the peace is achieved, which means that if Taiwanese people would like to negotiate with China to pursue peace, and the U.S. might not intervene in the process. So it all depends on what kind of goal that we want to pursue, and we cannot send the wrong message to the U.S.
So your point is that that the authors are actually wrong in saying that the U.S. seems to be saying it's against unification, because their goal is actually just peace.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
To deter war, Taiwan must allow leaders in Beijing to believe that peaceful unification remains possible. Now, this is probably one of the most controversial comments in the article. Wennie, does this sound like appeasement to you?
So this is one of the controversial quotes in the article, but also in the article it does say that the United States should also step in here, and it should include the assurance provided by previous administrations, and that includes what we've spoken about before. But also it does also emphasize the two things that we've also spoken about before, by peaceful means and the assent of the Taiwanese people. And this is very important that they included this, because the assent of the Taiwanese people includes what do the Taiwanese people want. And you've mentioned the polls that Chengchi University has just given. It's status quo.
That's right, de facto independence, right? Professor Su, let's address that the appeasement issue, because this is one of the criticisms, isn't it, of the article. Do you think that this is borderline appeasement?
Yeah.
Let me just give
yes.
a definition of appeasement.
Yeah.
The policy of acceding to the demands of a potentially hostile nation in the hope of maintaining peace.
I think this is unlikely to happen, like this kind of appeal for appeasement, because most of the political elites right now, I think, in Taiwan believe that, and also notice that the majority of Taiwanese people would like to pursue or maintain the status of de facto independence. Like I said, it's a kind of wishful thinking in the article that it seems that as long as we assure that possibility still exists, everything will be fine. No, I don't think so.
Yeah. And finally, Wennie, I mean, from the KMT's point of view, although the stance of course is different to the DPP's, but again, for the KMT, the One China is the ROC, not the PRC.
Yes. But if we're still talking about the article, it does also suggest Taiwan, that we do not change the official name of the ROC.
Yeah.
And we do not pursue independence or any other sort of permanent separation by resolutions.
No, but what I'm getting at is the peaceful unification
yes,
aspect.
And I do not believe, I don't think it is appeasement. I think it is a different approach. So from the KMT, we believe that dialogue is very important, and there hasn't been dialogue for many years. And without dialogue—
Because of the breakdown from Beijing's side.
Yes, according to the article. But also, since this current government has been in power, there hasn't been dialogue, and there's been a lot less exchanges. And we believe that we can have cultural exchanges, educational exchanges, other forms of exchanges, and dialogue, and that I would not say that is appeasement.
But what does peaceful unification mean from the KMT point of view?
So right now we are not pursuing peaceful unification.
Yeah. So it's what I'm saying is
preserve
it's
the
something
status
that is
quo.
also not
Yes.
doesn't align with the KMT's standpoint either.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
from the article, yes, yes. We, right now the KMT, we do not seek unification. Yes,
Okay.
It's all about what the people want.
Absolutely. Okay. So we're going to have to wrap it up now.
sure.
I'm sorry for that. Professor Su Yanbing
Yeah.
and Wennie Wu, thank you so much for joining Taiwan Talks today.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching our show today. Stay safe and see you next time.